In the pre-dawn hours of April 22nd, 2010, 8 fully armed agents of the Immigration and Naturalization Services waited outside a house in a sleepy suburb of Miami, Florida. These agents were not there to bust some kind of illegal immigration crime ring. In fact, most of the people in this house were naturalized American citizens except for one, a boy. And these 8 agents were part of an effort coordinated by over 100 agents and approved by the president to get a 7-year-old boy out of this house so he can go back to Cuba. I'm referring to the story of Ilan Gonzalez, a boy who lost his mom on the treacherous journey from Cuba to America and whose father wanted to come back home to Cuba. Ilan Gonzalez found himself, it must have been the weirdest moment in American Cuba politics. And this international custody battle quickly found itself in the middle of a huge media and political debate on immigration. And this debate was over how 120,000 Cuban immigrants would change the country. Many people thought they would be an economic burden, and the rest of the country would have to commit resources to keep these immigrants fed, housed, and clothed. And others feared that they would steal American jobs and force American citizens out of work. As Jews, we have the opportunity to take a different perspective, because we remember what it was like to be strangers in a strange land. Leviticus teaches us, "The stranger who sojourns with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him or her as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." We have the collective experience of Ilan and the Cubans who crossed their own version of the Red Sea to get here. And so many Americans, and Jews among them, invited the Cubans to be natives among us. And so that event is now 16 years behind us. And we have the benefit of hindsight. What happened? Who won this battle of immigration? Well, the Cubans who stayed were able to find jobs without ruffling employment and pushing out other Americans. And when these Cubans had jobs, they spent their money, and they actually helped the economy of Florida. And furthermore, they became successful business owners and politicians, and they participated in the American experience in all ways the rest of the Americans do. However, the controversy continues. The American political landscape is full of rhetoric on immigration, which has part become xenophobic. This rhetoric continues to engender inflammatory discourse of the economic disaster of receiving immigrants, and they've now added the additional discourse of equating immigrants as potential terrorists. In short, they're turning an immigration controversy into a national security controversy, and it's wrong. Florida Governor Rick Scott was put in an impossible situation when gunmen Omar Mateen, while pledging allegiance to ISIS, attacked a nightclub and hurt or killed over 100 people this past June. Understandably, the governor is quoted as saying that he wants to prevent radical Islam from entering his state. Unfortunately, he's also written letters to congressional leaders saying that they must take aggressive action in preventing Syrian refugees from being relocated in the United States due to national security. The problem is that Omar Mateen was not an immigrant. He was born in New York City. And almost all these Syrians have nothing to do with terrorism and are in fact victims of it. Rick Scott is enjoying the benefit of Cuban immigrants within his state while preventing Syrians from relocating to Florida because he is confusing terrorism with religion. And unfortunately, Syria is in the middle of a crisis right now, with a war that's displaced over 13.5 million people, almost half of which are children. And only 10,000 total are allowed to come into the United States. Meanwhile, the United States offers 20,000 new visas to Cubans each year. Cuba's immigration success may be due to its proximity, but I also imagine it's helpful that they are not perceived as Muslims. So it's next to impossible for refugees like Syrians to immigrate into our country, because a small and violent few have fed the fears of xenophobia in this country who demand that we prevent all refugees from Muslim countries from immigrating. In this week's Torah portion, Moses is teaching the Israelites how they should serve Adonai. And he says, "You shall not turn over to his master a servant who seeks refuge with you from his master. He shall live with you in any place he may choose among the settlements in your midst. Wherever he pleases, you must not ill-treat him." And Moses continues, "You shall not subvert the rights of the stranger. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt, and Adonai your God redeemed you from there. We were all once strangers in a strange land. In the United States, that's as true now as it was then, which is why it's so infuriating that not just the Florida governor, but 28 governors want to refuse admitting Syrian refugees into their states. These governors cite fear of letting terrorists within our borders, even with a vetting process that takes years to complete. Okay, so I've given you this huge problem, and I don't have a solution. But I would like to make an observation. I could spend the rest of this sermon giving you statistics concerning the benefits of immigration, and I can relate to you story after story of the awful conditions of displaced peoples like Syrian refugees have to face every day. However, I don't believe that statistics or stories are helpful, because I believe the heart of this controversy is the fear of the other, the fear of the unknown, and really just fear itself. Emerson wrote, "Fear defeats more people than any other one thing in this world." Even in a time of economic stability, where one has the means to provide for themselves and their family, there is still the fear that can all be taken away. Student Rabbi Ben Fried once said, "Fear has the potential to cause us to be less rational, more impulsive, and more judgmental." That fear defeats the rationale of statistics and the salience of the horrible conditions of displaced people. But the Torah has a unique stance on fear. In Deuteronomy, Moses tells the Israelites, "And now Israel, what does Adonai your God demand of you? But to fear Adonai your God, to go in all God's ways, to love God, and to serve Adonai your God with all your heart and all your soul." I'm sure the Torah isn't demanding that we fear God by blaming our problems on an ethnic minority. Deuteronomy, it would seem, is taking a nuanced approach towards fear. These emotions of fear and love are not contradictory, but in fact complementary, and they both prepare us to serve Adonai. And this passage proves another point. Emotions like fear are not logical problems. No matter how safe our situation, we still fear for our own security. For example, I live in a locked apartment complex in a safe neighborhood with really great neighbors, and yet every night I continue to lock both the locks on my door. Fear drives us to make illogical decisions. Dumbledore, the fictional headmaster of J.K. Rowling's book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, said, fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself." In other words, fear of immigrants increases the fear of immigration. Trying to understand the choices people make from being scared is like trying to understand why God didn't let Moses into Canaan. It's impossible. But Emerson also wrote, "Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain." As Jews, we were once immigrants into the land of Canaan. As Americans, we were once immigrants into the United States. We faced the fear of being immigrants, and now we face the fear of accepting them. And I'll be the first to admit that it's scary to let strangers into my home. But I don't place that fear on the strangers. Instead, I work to defeat it the same way Moses instructs us to serve Adonai, by inviting them with both love and fear, with all my heart, with all my soul. And to those who are against immigration of these displaced people, I understand that your actions are based on the safety of yourselves and your country, and it's okay to be scared. However, these displaced peoples who badly need a home can't do anything worse than we've already done to ourselves. So I encourage us with both love and fear to give them the same chance our ancestors were given.